how have the conditions been created so that, you know, these influences are so influential?
Other bits I was not surprised. This is like extreme misogyny and toxic masculinity that I know is out there. So there were bits that I was like, yeah, I know that that's out there. We hear it, we see it.
Their feeling of feeling lost in society. They've got the algorithms online pushing this content towards them. So what can we do to create almost the antithesis of their narrative?
In the conversations they were having, it was just straight up abusive and straight up just humiliating.
Hello and welcome back to the Social Matters podcast. We are three social workers talking about social matters. My name's Eugene.
My name's Fran.
My name's Nadia.
You hesitated a little bit.
I am Nadia.
I promise. Just making sure. Hi, team.
Hey.
Hi.
I have to confess that I'm pretending to be really calm and joyful, but I just got it.
Hi, team.
Sweating.
Hello, welcome back. This is Londoner time when you have a 90-minute wait for a train. It feels like it's the end of the world, but I made it because of your buffer time. Now it's getting to places half an hour before.
Buffer time.
It's a good time.
It is.
It's a good thing. But how you both doing?
Yeah, good. I'm very much enjoying the sunshine.
Yes.
It just makes everything so lovely. It's so nice. It's not particularly warm, but it's sunny. So yeah, I've been enjoying that.
Yeah, I'm feeling very springy as well with the sun, and I went down to my allotment last night because my approach to my allotment is just throw some seeds in it in October and just hope
See what happens.
It's a very laissez-faire approach to allotmenting, so I was like, all right, better go down. So it was literally that high with weeds, so I spent the whole evening sifting through, and there was a row of carrots and some spring onions. I mean, survival or what? So I've
Nice.
cleared the way. So yeah, it's definitely feeling like exciting times, but the back is not thanking me today because it's not an interesting posture. And then I sat there, and then I just sat in the soil for one bit, just picking the weeds like a small child. But yeah, it's a little bit could do with a massage. But.
Feel free to share your
My
harvest.
produce. Yeah, of course.
Love that.
Well, the thing is, the carrot leaves are there, but I don't know what's underneath.
What else could be underneath?
Well, like it could be just like a tiny, do you know when you're like, I was like, oh, let them grow a bit more, but it could be like nothing. I don't know.
It is what it is.
No, but it's an achievement. I had the urge to ask you about your allotment the other day, and now you raised it. I was like, oh yeah. Do you walk past it when you go into your house, or you see it just?
Yeah, it's kind of near. You walk past it to go into flats, and it's a bit. There's some symbolism there because I'm always looking like, oh, that needs tending to, and they got higher and higher, and then I was like, right, and because it was a lovely, spring evening. Yeah. Went down and but like I said, you wouldn't have known what had survived. And then I was like, they've come through. So yeah.
That's a great achievement. I'm wondering whether the foxes or squirrels will get to it, but they haven't. Because my mum grows a lot of fruit and veg in her garden, and the squirrels always gets her olives.
Olives?
Yeah.
Bougie allotment.
She's got olive trees. No, Mama, it's just a garden. It's a garden. She's got she grows corn, she grows carrots, she grows spinach, she grows.
Come on, Mama.
What else does she grow? Tomatoes.
Tomatoes. I was going to say tomatoes.
Yeah. She grows everything. She hardly buys.
Wonderful men.
Huh?
She grows wonderful men.
I did it on myself, really. And you said plural. Out of all of my brothers, I'm the only one. I'm only joking.
No.
But this kind of connects, and you probably answered it to an extent, because I know in our training, and one of our check-ins is what brings you joy. So that was what was coming to my head, because we did a training earlier this week, and we asked everyone else what brings them joy, or what's brought them joy is since we last was with them. So my question to you is, what's brought you joy this year? Let's do this year, since the turn of the year.
Generally, there are a few things that bring me joy. Food. I love food. Music and dancing. Those are my things, and I'm always eating, singing and dancing, and yeah, I've had a lot of that this year. Like it's been quite a joyful start to the year for me. I know we're like nearly 4 months deep, but like it's been really good.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
What about you, Fran?
I suppose if I go then a bit specific, I think, as you both know, nature
Nature.
gives me joy. And I
Nature.
start and I
Cue to Eugene used the wide shot camera for that.
yeah, just like
There's
an
nothing there.
orange background.
Just a little bit of leaf
As you
here.
know, being in an orange hue gives me joy. And I am basically studying to be a forest bathing nature connection guide and therapist, which is really exciting. And then being in the allotment, as I said, kind of is just really nice. And there's stuff that's in soil that like is good for us, like eating. No, but like what it has and kind of being in our hands and just kind of getting messy. But I was actually wearing gloves last night, so I need to probably go, take them off. But it was so weedy that it required like industrial equipment. But yeah, so I think being in nature gives me joy. And yeah, starting this course and harvesting some carrots, hopefully. Like growing things.
Oh, I can't wait. I'm going to make a carrot soup. I'm already planning what I'm going to make with your carrots. We'll come down and collect them. My one was, like, I think the obvious one is sunshine. I think that makes a huge difference. Like, my journey today was terrible, and I could see in both of your eyes when I walked in, are you okay, Eugene? You made it? And I'm like, I'm all right, because the sun's out.
I really think I know what you're going to say is bringing you joy this year. But yeah, let's hear it.
I know,
You know,
me too. I'm like,
there's a number of things. I'm not going to say the obvious ones. But no, the sunshine, just generally speaking, because I think, like, I probably said it on the podcast before, but everybody's just walking with a different vibe, a different connection. And especially, and part of the reason why I wanted to bring that as a check-in is because of like the topic we're going to talk about today and just what's going on in the world, and particularly in the Middle East and recently and all around the world. I think it's so important to connect with the significance of these events and how they eliminate joy for a lot of people and more directly connected, but just people in general who just are against like violence and the killing of people. So I think it's important for moments to kind of connect with joy without reducing or minimising the experiences of people. And yes, of course, Arsenal bringing me joy currently.
yeah, we were like, what's it going to be?
Cup finals this Sunday. By the time this episode comes out, I would have been celebrating or not. Yeah, we won. Oh no, we lost. That's for the edit. But yeah, we're close to doing something very, very special. So that's bringing me joy. But yes, that, like I said, part of the reason I'm bringing that is because I think the episode we're talking about may not bring as much joy as that check-in. But today we're gonna have a bit of a conversation about the Louis Theroux documentary on Netflix that we all watched, Inside the Manosphere. And part of the reason why we were thinking about discussing this is like we like to pride ourselves on having conversations that are meant to happen, are important in when thinking about diversity and inclusion and educating people, but just the fair treatment of people in this particular situation of women. So yeah, we thought we'll bring it to the table and have a bit of a conversation. But I think starting a bit broad, just the broad question to the both of you is what stood out for you? What were you drawn to, or what stood out for you after watching the episode?
So, quite a few things stood out for me. So I'll like just start talking and see what comes out my mouth. But something that a scene that particularly stood out for me was there was a scene where Louis Theroux was filming somebody doing a podcast, like one of these influencers doing a podcast, and this person like invites women onto his podcast, and there seems to be a sort of understanding that in some ways it's like mutually beneficial for the both of them, that in terms of like women coming on because they recognize it's gonna get them followers and views for their platforms and things, and he invites them on to basically humiliate and shame them, and is something that he benefits from because he also gets clicks and views and things. But I just remember like looking at that scene, and obviously we're in a podcast studio, we record, and the way that he was speaking to some of these women, the things that he was doing, the conversations they were having, it was just straight up abusive, and straight up just humiliating, and the thing that kind of stood out for me is what it was like to see the faces of those women when they were leaving the studio, because they had been like abused, and there was this just darkness and bad vibe like, as they were leaving, and it was so counter to what it's like when we get together and we're in the podcast studio and then we're heading out, and we've had really uplifting conversation, we've kind of filled each other up. And I just remember thinking, that just feels so awful to have witnessed that and seen that for those women, and that particular kind of influencer, the conversations that Louis was having with him and his partner as well, those were the ones for me that kind of stood out a lot. There was just so much that was said, but I was also very interested in what wasn't said and noticing body language, especially with his partner and him, and the tenseness and the awkwardness. That was one of the things that kind of stood out for me.
Yeah, just picking up on that kind of what was said and what wasn't said, because I was left with so many different feelings. But I think there was something in that when I think about the overall sort of like production of it, I was left like feeling, maybe compared to some of his other documentaries, like there was a real barrier. And I know there's often that pushback, but I was thinking about that of like we saw it probably from us looking at body language and just that feeling of discomfort from either what these men were saying or the women who they were harming and abusing. But I think I was thinking about like just interesting from the making of it, because it was almost this like meta perspective of him filming them and them filming him. Because I think often in a lot of documentaries, people might get uncomfortable with the line of questioning and say like, okay, enough now, you need to go. But it was almost like it was fueling then their like pushback of Louis. So there was something about that really stuck with me, of this like bizarre situation of control, because as soon as something went there, they were then putting it out onto the internet, and then that was informing some of the questions. So that was different and unique to any kind of documenting, which I think is how a lot of kind of modern, social media influences present. It's kind of very, very controlled. So I think there was something in that of like a lot of it for me was not necessarily. I mean, Louis got a lot, but there was a lot more around what you could just see and that feeling. And there were bits I was like openly like swearing at the TV or whatever. But then I afterwards I was chatting with my girlfriend and we were both like, I know this happens. Other bits I was not surprised. This is like extreme misogyny and toxic masculinity that I know is out there. So I was sort of there were bits that I was like, I know that's out there. We hear it, we see it. It's a dark underbelly byproduct of broader misogyny, isn't it? That's kind of developed its own really dark underbelly in the current climate. But some of it I was like, sadly, I was like, the thought that a lot of people do think that way was not a shock, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
it does make a lot of sense. It was. I went on a bit of a journey with this documentary and broke it down in my head with my reflections of like a before, during and after. So beforehand, when I saw the trailer and the title, on reflection, I assumed that it was going to be a documentary that explored the manosphere in general, so Inside the Manosphere and stuff like that. And during it, I think I was watching it through that lens. So immediately after, my reflections was a lot like what you're saying around not being surprised and being kind of angered and looking at the abuse that the women experienced in that moment. But a lot of my reflections has happened after. So after, through looking at the commentary from different people online and going back and looking at the actual description of the show. So I think the description of the show, I should have read that beforehand, because I think the documentary focused on I think a very small element of the manosphere. So these high profile social media influencers who are doing what they're doing just to make money. But what I think I was expecting and wanting more of is how does that this kind of ideal trickle down into the everyday young man or young boy, or so all of the kids who are running up to these respective influencers, like they just met Lionel Messi or a global superstar like Taylor Swift or Beyonce, how they were like idolizing them, or those two men at the beach who were like almost felt like they were about to cry, like how they've influenced this guy has influenced their life. I want to go and see, and it's not for Louis Theroux to do it because I think the show description said what it was going to do, but I think my expectations beforehand was more. But looking at how that kind of ideal influences the younger generation, and I actually came across there's a documentary on the Manosphere that Ross Kemp is doing or has done, but I just came across that like literally yesterday, so I haven't had a chance to watch it. But from that trailer, it looks to take things a bit further and thinking about the impact on young people and young individuals. Because I guess for me, the reflection afterwards and looking at the narrative from people online, reflecting on it, was thinking more about I think Vicky Shevlin, shout out to her, friend of the podcast, said it of around the narrative of or the word manosphere can be quite, it's almost done to make things more palatable, whereas what we're talking about is the violence against women and girls, the abuse of women and girls, and not just through a physical peer-to-peer level, but through the ridicule, through the coercive control, like you described in what stood out for you. And I think that's one of the things that was standing out for me, thinking, like, what are young boys and young men being influenced by?
Yeah. Because like you said, I think that's a similar reflection to me. I think when I was saying, I wanted some of these other bits, but like you said, it did what it said on the tin, but maybe I, before understanding, was going in thinking it might explore some of that. And that's when I reflected, like, what was it? Was it the barrier that not being able to get access? But it was an important and insightful documentary nonetheless. I think those two young men who they sort of interviewed briefly gave us some insight, who were not related to these kind of major influences. And it was just, there was a sadness, wasn't there?
Yeah.
I guess when I lost, isolated, that experienced kind of trauma, and the same for the influencers as well. I mean, that's just a snippet of those two young men who were kind of wanting this kind of direction, I suppose. But I think there was commonalities with some of the kind of influencers are making money from it in terms of their own backstory as well.
100%. I was just thinking about, like, yes, Louis Theroux sort of, I suppose, highlighted these influencers, and like, we can all say, it's terrible, and there is something that they're saying and that they're doing that is appealing and speaking to these young men, and it's like, how have the conditions been created so that these influencers are so influential? Like, what is it that societally that's happened that has meant that these young boys are so what they're speaking is what I should be listening to. And some of the things, it's so kind of, you can kind of see how it happens, because some of the things that they're kind of saying and promoting is like, be successful, or you can kind of see why that appeals, but then it's all the other things that are like included in that message.
I had the same thing. There was one person was saying something about like the system's broken. We need to, and I was like, fight the power. And then it went, because the direction, as you said, that void that it then filled was down violence against women and girls, hatred, misogyny, toxic masculinity. And there was almost this crossroads, because there was a bit that I was like, and then that rather than going another way, like, what is it that there's that gap that it then went down the dark route?
You listed some of the isms that kind of came up, misogyny and kind of homophobia, but the thing that I was a bit like, that seems very left, is like anti-Semitism was like thrown in there as well. There was a lot of kind of, it's because of the Jews thing, and I was like, I was really reflecting on, what that's really surprised me, and I didn't really know why. But I was just reflecting a lot on that. And the other thing I was thinking about in terms of the isms was like racism, but like not. It wasn't necessarily something that was named, but something that we saw in terms of the kind of the girls that were, that they were involved. I didn't see any kind of black, dark-skinned women in the documentary. And it then made me think about sort of, racism in terms of like beauty standards and what is considered kind of beautiful or not. No, there wasn't any sort of named or overt anti-black racism, but I didn't see any dark-skinned black beautiful women in the space, and it just made me think again about how all the isms in some way have been captured in this documentary, is whether it's named and spoken or whether it's unnamed and kind of unspoken.
Definitely, I'd agree with that. And just reflecting on both your points earlier. One of the things that stood out for me was the absence of morality. Like, I think that the absence of morality, and maybe is inaccurate, but I think it's disappearing and has disappeared over the years. So when I talk about the absence of morality, is that, okay, if somebody told you, I think there's a question of like, if somebody told you that if you press this button, you get £2 billion, but 5 people in the world will die. And people are like, oh yeah, I'll press it. So it's the absence of morality for these people, is that for the people who were highlighted in this documentary, is they are focused on making money and becoming super rich because they say the system prevents them from doing that and doesn't allow them to do that. Morality would prevent you from pursuing that desire for that level of wealth, because you're like, little boys are abusing and treating young women and young girls in a really violent way, ultimately leading to death in some situations. So I feel like when it comes to what could be done to make some sort of difference, I think we need to have more conversations about like morals and values from children from a young and early age. And there was something that I saw, and I can't remember the name of the person. It was an American guy on a panel. This is part of my post kind of watching of the documentary reflections. And going back to your comment of that one of you made about why and how young people are being influenced by these influencers, is he said that when stuff like this happens, I'm paraphrasing now, we spend energy and to an extent rightly so of critiquing and criticizing these extreme men, but the way that they are able to be influential is because there is an absence of an alternative. So he said in society there's an absence of a space or a community for young men to have conversations about what it means to be young men. Some people get it from good family networks, good community networks, good relationships with parents or loved adults, but a lot of them don't have that. And when they are looking for a community or people to kind of like affirm their feeling of feeling lost in society, their feeling of not having a space or not being able to lean into their version of their masculinity. They've got the algorithms online pushing this content towards them. And if we as adults listen to some of what they said and be like, oh, okay, I get that to an extent, but we are adults and we have our mindsets. Like an impressionable 13 or 14-year-old, is understandable why they would go down that route. So what can we do to create almost the antithesis of their narrative to allow young boys and young men to discuss and reflect on what it means to be a man?
And I think part of that comes from like emotional literacy and being able to talk and explore about emotions, because we know, a lot of suppressed, unprocessed emotions can come out in anger. And that was a dominant sort of feeling from a lot of these sort of young men, this kind of lostness and not being permissioned or feeling permission to be able to talk about their emotions. And as you said, they're a byproduct of a society that has, historically said, boys don't cry, man up, all of these messages that come through that are not new for so long, that I think that is a big part of it, of like, who do a lot of young boys, men have to be able to talk about how they're feeling. So yeah, it's then getting kind of warped with this sense of, I guess, I don't know, like entitlement, superiority that's just coming out in all sorts of unhelpful ways, which is really sad. Another thing that I was thinking about is just the influence of power. And I was really struck by, like that the adjacency of people wanting to be near them, like the people who were filming, who'd like won a competition, and they were just there and they didn't speak. They were sort of these voiceless sort of minions, for want of a better term, just perpetuating this narrative. And again, I was kind of, there's a part of me that's like, I want to speak to that guy. Like, what's his story? The kind of the social worker, curious person in me was like, what is gone? Yeah, who are you in the corner?
100%. I think, from what you was just saying, it's just making me think about when you were saying, the social worker curiosity bit in you was really interested in what was happening for the people around them. And I was also interested in like what happened for them as well, as in the influences themselves. And there was quite a theme of, I suppose, again, like loss for some of them, like it disrupted relationships with their fathers as well. Like that was something, and it was just so interesting to see the levels, I suppose, of where these things can get to if there isn't that self-reflection and self-awareness of what might be happening for you, and how that's then influencing how you're showing up in the world. And you were saying something huge about like the lack of morality or whatever, and I was just imagining one of them saying, I've got morals, I wouldn't speak in front of my mum like this, or he actually said that was something that he wouldn't that he'd do, or he recognizes that with his mum he has to show up differently. That was, and it just made me think about, what are people's views of morals, and how does that kind of influence how they kind of show up in the world. The other thing that I think really stood out for me was the level of paranoia, like across all of the influences. They were so like, what's Louis doing? What's he saying? Like, how am I being portrayed? Like, how's it coming? How's he going to twist this? Who's he talking to? No, let me shut that down. You can't talk to that woman. You can't talk to this other person around me. Or she doesn't really want to be seen on camera, so she doesn't have to be. There was such a level of paranoia and the need and the want to control that comes from a place, I would say, of not. Of insecurity and not being able to be certain about themselves.
It was making me, I agree with that around insecurity, and I think insecurity in two ways in my mind: insecurity and fragility about who they are as people, but insecurity and fragility about getting found out. Because I guess the hypothesis that I hold, and I'm not wedded to this super strongly, but I think they kind of know that part of what they're doing is well, I think it was quite evident actually, is that the more extreme they go, the more views that they get. I think one of them was even when I think Louis asked him, why can't you just maybe create content that's positive or that, and then he paused and he was reflecting on it. And I think when one of them, the way that they kind of hesitated after when talking with their wife or their partner at the time, I think an element of them, they know that they have to push the extreme in order to get more views. It's almost like you have to keep pushing the barrier so that people continue to watch you or click on your page or subscribe or continue to pay you money. But that level of control for me is connected with that. Actually, if Louis asks the right questions, or if he finds out certain things, then people online are gonna view me as weak or not being like this person that I say I am. So and that's a hypothesis that I hold on to generate curiosity about what is the driving, what's driving these guys. But again, I think one element is focusing on them, but what I walked away feeling more kind of concerned about is how their narrative and what they're pushing is influencing the young people. Because if you talk to a 13-year-old or 14-year-old right now, and you ask them, or you ask a bunch of them, who are your role models, who influences you, I think there'll be a good percentage who say the people who are not only in the documentary but like them in reality, in the world of social media. And who else is there?
Yeah, I think that was something that kind of struck me. A couple of points to yours. I think one is almost like them being in this feedback loop, negative feedback loop of kind of validation. And as you said, the darker they go, the more clicks they get, that then feeds and perpetuates this narrative. But I was also thinking about their identity, their skewed identity, because it's quite a persona as well. You've got your online persona and the blurred boundaries between that and reality. But then building on your point of like the young people who are then viewing the content are at such an impressionable age in terms of their identity development. I mean, we're always growing and developing. I'm in my 40s. I still don't know who I am. No, but there is that, isn't there? Like, as in, it's such an impressionable age. And if you're 13, 14, seeing that, your identity is not formed. And just the kind of, that is a worry, the kind of negative potential influence of that if you don't have different narratives to kind of challenge it and show a perspective. And that's a dilemma, isn't it? Because we were actually having a conversation with someone this week, like if you are a parent or carer, auntie, uncle, whatever, of kind of adolescent boys, how much you go there, have these conversations if it's age appropriate for them to see the documentary, because it's that thing, isn't it, of like, it's out there. So like the importance of preparing to be able to have that criticality, develop that criticality for a young person, that is one view. These are different views.
Yeah, and I do think there is something in how Louis does that in terms of like the interview style of like he's not necessarily going in there to change views. It's just taking a position of curiosity. I mean, there are times when he does like challenge, but taking that position of curiosity, thinking about about how we're taking something from the documentary to apply to day to day. Just holding that space of curiosity and be like, what do you make of this? What do you think of this? This is what I think. This is what other people think. Just being able to hold conversation about it rather than, you're just banned from that. Like, you're not allowed to do that. It doesn't allow space for that criticality to develop.
Yeah, 100%. The word criticality was coming to my head is that, and I'm not a parent, but with the young people around me, or if I were a parent of a young boy or teenage boy, that sitting alongside them to help develop the criticality, because I think putting anything in the bracket of extreme bad and say you can't watch this or that person is completely bad or whatever, but then there's elements that resonates with the young person, is that how can you alongside them develop that criticality? Because one thing that all of them, not all of them, I can't remember if all of them spoke to it on the documentary, but when they were talking about the women in their life that they loved, the standard was different. When they were talking about, one of them was talking about their mum, one of them talked about their hypothetical daughter, one of them talked about their actual daughter, the way that they talked about, one of them talked about their wife, is that the standard that you had in relation to women shifts slightly when it's got to do with your loved one. So for me, if I'm sitting alongside a young person watching it, or young boy, it's helping them notice the kind of conversations or the things that are happening maybe beyond the obvious, and helping them develop that criticality, because that is where I think there's an absence, is that maybe we look at these kind of high-level influencers who are doing what they're doing and just put them in these guys are idiot bracket, and it's too easy to do that.
Yeah.
Whereas actually we need to understand, why is it that they've got 2 million followers on a particular social media page? Why is it that the young people are chasing after them on the street like they are the newest rock star or pop star? And having those conversations alongside children is important. And I think there's stuff that's happening around education around with young boys in schools around how they treat young girls, because a lot of this is happening in the schools as well, like the misogyny and the violence and the hate towards women and girls. So I think education at a young age is important, but doing it alongside the young boys and not kind of demonizing anyone is important. Thank you, team. It felt like, you know what, I want to watch that Ross Kemp documentary now and then see whether it's worth. Well, we'll have the conversation offline because we haven't got too many more episodes this season. But really helpful, I think, as a conversation between us, but also a conversation starter. And it's great to see so many people talking about it. And I think hopefully we add to that.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. We have been 3 social workers talking about social matters. You can find us on Instagram at Matters Podcast and on LinkedIn, Social Matters. Do leave a comment, a review, and let us know what you think about the episode. We'd love to hear your thoughts, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.